Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and everyone, hey, I hope you're doing well. And of course, we have a great show planned for you. Second part of the program, computer and technology news. The first part of the program, the NCC group. If you haven't heard of them, then you are in luck. We'll be talking everything cybersecurity about vulnerabilities in really important infrastructure around the globe, and just the risk of having them like that. It's going to be a very interesting conversation, and we look forward to it. But before we get started, a couple of things, including computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything from a link to our guest website, the archives, links to the podcast, anything and everything that you need to find can be found on computeramerica.com. Also, while you're there, check out some of the articles, check out the live video feed, and that should be about it. Everyone, it's going to be a great show, and why don't we go ahead and just get started? And now, for today's guest, we have none other than the NCC group, and if you haven't heard of them, then don't worry, you are going to hear all about what they do, how they do it, and it's just going to be a very interesting interview. So, of course, they are global experts in cybersecurity and risk mitigation, and I'm sure a lot of you know that, I think just the other day we were talking about how Facebook app developers, not Facebook themselves, but the app developers have left over 540 million different, user records and data points open and available on unsecured databases. So, either be Facebook, either be Equifax, either be, just any of these companies that have lost your data. Well, these are the people who are kind of in charge of making sure that doesn't happen. It's a tough fight, and I'm sure that they're up to the challenge. But here to talk about how they do it is of course Mr. Gene Meltser, and he is the regional vice president of the NCC group, and we're really looking forward to talking with him. So, Gene, welcome on to Computer America. How you doing?
Thanks for having me, Ben. I appreciate the time. Glad to talk to you.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. Now, of course, cybersecurity, it's an ever-growing field, and it's very hard to get a real grasp on just exactly what it is you do. But hey, I'm going to ask you to do that anyways. Give us a little bit of background on the NCC group and a bit of background on yourself. Have you always been in tech, or what is your background as well?
Well, sure. I started my career as a pen tester, as basically a hobby, just playing around with computers, and realized that computer security was incredibly interesting, right? Trying to identify a particular vulnerability or flaw in the system, and then showing people how to exploit the flaw and ultimately how to fix it is incredibly valuable and satisfying. So that turned into a career. I spent many years as a pen tester and application security consultant, and now I manage the New York City office of NCC Group.
Very, very cool. And of course, that could have very easily gone the other way, where if you didn't add that last line about how to fix the vulnerabilities that you found, you'd be, on the other side of the equation. But no, it's people like you that are on both sides, and the fact that you're trying to help people makes you all the more valuable. So let's go ahead and talk about just the current state of cybersecurity. Obviously, I mean, here on the show, we advocate for it all the time. We speak to guests such as yourself, but I'll be honest, more and more we hear stories about companies either mishandling data or, either bad actors able to get into it, get into systems that they weren't supposed to. I mean, the current state, even though cybersecurity seems to have been at the forefront for at least a number of years, if not a decade or more, why are things getting worse, or are they getting worse? Just what's your general feeling about cybersecurity in today's business world?
Sure. Yeah. Well, so the real problem here is complexity. As we surround ourselves with technology, and every device now is connected to the internet, and even the refrigerator has a screen where you can reorder supplies. For example, milk if you're out of milk. And we surround ourselves with this technology that makes our life easier, but ultimately, all these technologies carry a risk of being properly configured, properly designed. The engineers that design these systems have to think ahead and make proper assumptions on how users will use them, how they will manage them, how they will update them. And so this complexity just layers on top of itself over and over again, where the systems themselves that we now face from day to day, from consumer electronics to enterprise level systems, this is just an immense system, immense complexity that both enterprises and consumers face. And so securing all that has become much more than following a couple of simple rules or installing some software or buying some products. It really boils down to really trying to understand how software and hardware and systems interact and are configured, and how they operate, taking into consideration the specific use cases of how business actually uses these things. So all of that just drives the problem, making it much more complicated year after year, which ultimately results in more vulnerabilities and a much harder time of securing these systems.
And I guess that's kind of the question, where we've seen in the past year or two some very major vulnerabilities with some kind of underlying technology. And of course, I'm thinking of like the WPA, security protocol, where there was a problem with that, and it exposed tons and tons of routers. Everything that wasn't upgraded to WPA2, I think, was vulnerable. And then on top of that, I'm also thinking about the two recent Intel ones with Meltdown and Spectre, I believe they were called, where those also had vulnerabilities. I mean, when these vulnerabilities happen, they're on such a large scale. Is security just not at the forefront of these companies' minds, or is it just, hey, having, no matter how many people you pay, you'll never have the ears, eyes, and minds of the, just the consumer base at large?
Yeah, it's probably a second then. It's specifically with Meltdown and Spectre vulnerabilities. These vulnerabilities, for example, were exposed in software that's been long assumed as well-designed and secure. And we've all kind of trusted it and incorporated the software into our day-to-day lives with online shopping and banking and other things. Mm-hmm. And when a vulnerability like that comes along, it really affects everybody, and it's just a massive impact of a small thing that really is now affecting almost every deployed system in the world. So the impact is just huge. But at the core, finding these vulnerabilities takes serious expertise with crypto backgrounds, people that focus not just on kind of checking the box, checking the list of doing, the basics of making sure that your systems are secure, but really diving into the crypto aspect, the low hardware aspect, the low software aspect of software. And this is where these vulnerabilities really come up from.
I gotcha. So, and one of our main topics for today is none other than ransomware. So, if you would kind of give us a bit of a kind of precursor, because ransomware, it's insidious and it's a bit different, because it's not just about taking over a system. It's also about actually getting money from people, and in some cases, exorbitant amounts of money. So, talk about ransomware. What is ransomware? And yeah.
Sure. So ransomware is really just a class of malware that has become more and more prevalent in the last couple of years. We're seeing the industry seeing a significant spike in ransomware because it's quite simply it's a really effective way of extracting large amounts of money from the community by a criminal enterprise with fairly low investment. So what really ransomware is about is really it's basically a piece of malware that, upon inspection of a particular target host or a system or your computer, it digitally encrypts the sensitive data, your files, your financial records, things that are important, and then it really demands an aggressive ransom payment to recover this data, typically in Bitcoin because it's really hard to trace, in exchange for the key to the encrypted data. Right. The amounts that the attackers or the criminals demand usually varies. Mm-hmm. It can be a few $100s, depending on if it's a user desktop, for example, or a user system, all the way up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the intended target, methods of infection, and types of data. As a matter of fact, you may have heard a recent infection of a aluminum production company. One of the largest aluminum producers in the world, in more than 40 countries, that just got hit with a massive ransomware attack.
Really?
That significantly, affected their capabilities in production and made a splash in the news just about a couple of weeks ago.
That's, and trust me, we keep hawkish on the news, but we actually didn't catch that one. If you want to give a little bit of background on that for anyone who may have missed it, myself included, I mean, how does an aluminum producer, with that large of a network, you mentioned, 35,000 employees, 40 different countries, tons and tons of computers, I bet. I guess, what does the ransomware kind of do to a system like that? Like, how does it kind of, slow down production? And I guess, how do you think it got in, or do we know how it got in there?
Well, we don't know how it got in there. We can only speculate. But if we can kind of assume the most common layers of infection, it could be somebody clicking on a link, a malicious link, somebody opening up an attachment, somebody browsing the web and downloading something and running, or it could be targeted where employees were specifically targeted with a uniquely crafted malicious email that made it look legitimate, and clicked on it or opened an attachment and ran some code which is by nature would execute on the desktop. Let's assume it's a user desktop within their company, that would first and foremost replicate across as many systems as it can. Secondly, encrypt as much data as it possibly can. Notify the criminal enterprise that is operating this particular strain of malware, and then demand ransom. So, but once again, this is just speculation. This would be the typical attack vectors. This is how these things typically happen. And of course, in this particular case, the attack could have been, it really hasn't been disclosed to how it happened, but it could have been like this.
So, and I just had to pull up an article on this, and it said that this was the same kind of malware that was used to attack, a Paris, France-based consulting firm. And this is something that I guess we see often. If they had, let's just say, maybe a security update that someone would have put out, I'm not really pushing any particular, kind of anti-malware software, but I mean, if this has been seen before, what would you say would be the best way for a company such as, a large aluminum manufacturing giant, what would be the best way to defend against this, other than the common practice of don't click links outside, from outside your organization or things like that? Is it updating, or is it, is there a way to defend against this?
Sure. Great question. It's really something that industry is right now kind of struggling with, because it's really hard to protect against stuff like this that looks different every time, right? The attackers are obviously invested in making sure malware works, and they have the widest possible reach in the malware that they try to put out there. So the look of malware is constantly changing. So we're constantly playing catch up with to identify how it looks like and what it looks like, and be able to catch it based on its signatures that it leaves and so forth. But attackers are also modifying it to stay ahead of the curve. So it's a continuous game of cat and mouse trying to get ahead of each other. There's unfortunately quite a few things that both individuals and businesses can do to protect themselves, and or at least think ahead to be prepared. So for individuals, quite simply, you have to plan ahead. You have to assume that some way along down the line in the future, you will be compromised. You will get some malware that you missed, and even though that we all think of ourselves as fairly well trained, and we understand what malware is. We read articles on the internet. We try to educate ourselves. Sometimes you wake up, you don't have your cup of coffee, you click on the link, and everything goes south. Mm-hmm. So it happens. So first and foremost, you have to plan ahead, which means backing up your data, your critical things, your financial records, things that are important to you. Don't keep them on your desktop. Put them somewhere safe, whether it's a standalone backup hard drive, whether it's a cloud backup solution, whether it's a password protected file somewhere else other than your day-to-day desktop. Protect your data and think about it. Have a plan ready, right? It's really important to know what to do. People panic. You should be contacting law enforcement. You should be notifying the security vendors. You should be thinking about security software, as far as what you should deploy to try to clean it. Think about what you would do and have a plan. Install anti-malware, obviously. That's a simple one. Right. There's lots of free solutions out there. There's lots of software, commercial software, that offers free solutions for end users. There's various articles on the internet, various guides on how to secure your system. Things like disabling, for example, and I'm going to get a little technical for the listeners, disabling RDP, for example, which is remote desktop protocol, which allows users to connect remotely to your systems. You can deploy software restriction policies, SRPs, to limit where malware could execute, right? You can read about that online. You can use modern browsers, right? Update your browser to Chrome or Mozilla or Firefox, something modern rather than some of the outdated systems, and apply patches to your systems, things like that. And finally, use secure password managers. Of course, that's really important to protect the keys to the castle that ultimately protect our data. Use password managers to store your passwords so that they're actually not on your systems. For businesses, it's a little bit different, but on the same strain, first and foremost, have a competent CISO, right? Hire security leadership that can steer your organization in the right direction, offer you sound advice, and have a plan in your organization to respond to these breaches once they do happen. In case of the recent breach of the aluminum provider, this is exactly what happened. Their CEO just started literally a day prior to the attack, and they've handled it wonderfully. So for businesses, first and foremost, separating your systems and servers into segments so that your user land production systems, your desktops, are separate from your servers where critical data lives, for example. Disabling share write permissions on shares in your Windows environment, hardening your desktops, disabling internet services. All these things aren't a panacea in itself, but they can all go a long way in preventing a malware infection once somebody clicks on the link. Finally, educating yourself and your users by offering training about modern threats, how attackers typically target, what are some of the potential attack vectors, what could a malicious email would look like, or maybe run some exercises where, for example, what we do with some of our clients, where we run simulations and educate end users on afterwards on what they should have been looking for or seen, and ultimately give management some view of how effective their current protection is and how educated their users are. We always recommend users or commercial clients to continuously test and validate their controls, right? Mm-hmm. You can spend a lot of time investing in systems hardening and hiring security leadership that can drive your organization in the right direction. But ultimately, if you're not testing what you put in place, you really don't know how you will react. And finally, have a plan ready as a business, right? What are you going to do first and foremost? Are you going to disconnect your systems? Are you going to unplug systems that are critical? How is the PR going to handle? How are you going to communicate with your investors the public, the press, the end users, and what are the messages that are going to be coming out of the organization. And that is really important. The first 24, 48 hours of after the breach, when organization is in a panic, having been demanded payment, response is critical here, and what they put out there as far as what consumers and vendors and clients are seeing is incredibly important in maintaining credibility and as far as being able to respond to an attack.
So,
and finally,
yeah. Oh, go for it.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ben.
No, please finish up your thought.
Yeah, and so my last thought is, finally, invest in security. It's really important. A lot of the small companies and startup businesses and some of the smaller clients, the things they tell us is that why would they be a target? Why would somebody target them? They're just a dentist office. They're just a real estate company that has 10 to 20 employees. And the key to the matter is malware attackers, they don't care how big you are. They will blast out malware to the largest possible spread. Think of an elephant gun, right? That just shoots widest scope. It's like a fire hose. Mm-hmm. And they will attack whatever is available. Targets opportunity. Right? So they don't really care if it's a large company, a small company, it's an end user, and they want to get as many compromises as possible so everybody can be targeted. So we always recommend, even for smaller businesses, spend time thinking about your controls, spend time thinking about what you would do in terms of a breach, and plan ahead.
Yeah, no, and all those completely agree, and very, very good outline. Although I will say, halfway through that, I was getting the feeling of like I'm listening to like kind of the same speech. I'm sure that how do I say it? Like business owners get when they want to install like a fire system, for fire suppression, or if a fire ever happens in their building. Like I kind of got the same feeling. It's like have a plan in place, practice the plan, run drills, have the security in place before, I should say, like the fire suppression systems in place before a fire happens. Like it seems like data security and cybersecurity has kind of started to evolve into, I guess, the same importance as you would just general security or fire fire response. It's almost at that same, or getting to that same level, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a must-have. It's no longer an option. Whether you spend and invest in your data security and having a plan and really thinking about how you're going to protect or respond to a breach, it's a must. And I agree. Fire suppression is a really good analogy here. Fire suppression, we don't think about it, right? It exists. We know it works. It's a proven technology. We only realize that it's there when bad things happen.
Yeah.
With technology and computer security, it's a bit different, where you have constant vendor pressure and new technologies coming out yearly that are all promising to solve our problems and promising to keep us secure, while attackers and bad guys out there are constantly evolving and modifying their attack mechanisms. So it's much more fluid, much more fast-moving situation where just having something that is good enough may not be sufficient. It may be sufficient today, but in 3 to 6 months, a year from now, landscape will change, your attacker patterns will change. What you think you bought versus what it's actually offering you may be different at that point. So it's really important not just to assume that purchasing a particular solution or an anti-malware system or virus filtering or web filtering solutions that lots of vendors offer aren't going to be the only thing that keeps you secure. It's really important to really understand what the limitations of that software that you deploy are and how else to protect your enterprise.
So, and for everyone out there watching the video portion, we're checking out your website right now. We see that you work primarily in a lot of different verticals: transport, oil and gas, IoT, retail, finance. So you guys are kind of behind the scenes, but at the same time offering a very important solution. And I'm sorry for kind of being so late into this interview and then asking this, but the NCC group, as far as cybersecurity goes, what services are you primarily active in? Is it, again, like the penetration testing? Is it responding to here's your comprehensive list and here are the weaknesses? What exactly, how do you work with a client who maybe comes to you and wants your services?
Sure. Thank you for asking that. So at its core, we're a computer security firm. We offer lots of services around security. from testing, whether it's web application penetration testing, network testing, wireless testing, mobile and IT devices, hardware or crypto services testing. These are all offensive services that try to emulate a particular attack or simulation using our skilled consultants to give a good understanding to our clients what vulnerabilities may exist and ultimately help them fix it. We also offer education services to help our clients to really understand and train their own internal staff to be able to respond to security. We offer a leadership guidance, right? So virtual CISO type approach where we help our clients take control of how to secure the enterprise from ground zero, for example, for some of the startups that we deal with and work with. We offer compliance and governance services, helping clients understand and navigate specific compliance requirements that industry may impose on them or vendors impose. We help our clients navigate vendor landscape and as far as relationships to ensure that trust is ultimately maintained. And there's lots of custom work as well in terms of every problem that we face is somewhat different from client to client. And where we really shine is taking a step back and helping clients really making sure that we understand what problems they're facing in the context of a specific business case and what they're trying to accomplish, and ultimately what's their budgets and what their goals are, to really craft custom solutions so that it's not a checkbox where we do some work and we do some testing and complete it and give clients full security, but instead we take a step back and really try to be as comprehensive as possible. And we do that by really focusing in the research aspect of security, where all of our consultants are spending significant amount of their time on individual research that's security relevant, that are involved in publishing and speaking engagements and conference presentations and ultimately tool development as well.
So people who are really experts in the industry. And I was just going to ask this, and then I was poking around your website, and there's a nice, large, big red button that says emergency ? I was about to say, can people contact you if they've been compromised, such as the aluminum manufacturing giant? Let's say someone is currently being ransomwared or, being asked for a ransom through ransomware. Can they contact you after the fact? Are you also like a response unit as well as a preventative unit?
Absolutely, and I apologize for not mentioning it earlier. We do have a very fast-growing and very capable incident response group within NCC that deals with exactly that, where we spin up a response team and help clients navigate not only technology problems that they're facing post or during a compromise, but also help them navigate the path of a compromise, how to respond to the press, how to respond to their vendors, the investors, the employees, and ultimately the bad guys as well, while taking care of the technology bit. What are the next steps in compromise? Preserving data, for example, preserving chains of evidence, and doing incident response forensic analysis on compromised data and systems. So every approach is obviously slightly different, but that's absolutely one of our core business units within NCC.
I gotcha. And and of course, there's I'm sure that you've run into a situation where maybe you've talked with clients and they found that there was already malware possibly on the network themselves. We've seen that ATP advanced or APT advanced persistent threats or something like that. There's a lot of layers to this, and I like what you said earlier, where it's like just adding layers of security, adding to the complexity of it all, and just not just having just one solution, but rather having lots of them over and over and over again. And that's probably the best way to kind of stay safe at this point.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's complex security is there's a bit of risk here, right? Complexity itself can give you false security, but ultimately it has to be designed well. It has to be multi-layered. Think of an egg, right, as your defense, right? Egg is protected by its shell, but it's fragile, and it kind of keeps the egg safe. But once you crack it, you're onto the soft insides, and game is over. So your security really shouldn't be that. Your security needs to be more like an onion, where there's layers upon layers upon layers of things that would prevent or at least slow down an attacker to give you enough time to respond and ultimately recover. So, and that's really where our advice and our guidance, both technology and governance, goes to our clients, is helping them design these solutions that are security solutions that are resilient, that are layered, that stop the attacker, but if not stop, at least slow down the attacker so that the clients can ultimately respond, detect, respond, and recover from an attack. And we do see, a significant spike over the last couple of years. For example, just last year, reading through some of the research documentation online, mm-hmm. ransomware spiked 88% in the second half of last year, right? And what's interesting here is that ransomware spike is happening, is accelerating. According to 2019 cybersecurity breaches survey conducted in UK just recently, and I quote, up-to-date malware protection statistics for companies went from 81 to 90%. So what does that really mean is that it's incredibly interesting that companies seem to be better protected, right? They went from 81 to 90% as being better protected against malware, and yet the attacks are still going up. So what it tells you is that the attack landscape just remains incredibly fertile. Yeah. Attackers will try anything to execute these attacks. And at the end of the day, it's extremely cheap for an attacker to execute an attack, and ultimately fairly expensive for somebody to defend against them. So we're going to continue seeing these spikes, these spikes on attack attempts, I think, going up more and more.
Yeah, and just to draw a recent event, I mean, just 2 days ago, there was that, there was a lady that was trying to get into Mar-a-Lago down in South Florida with actually a USB thumb drive full of malware. And really, like the person who stopped her was like the receptionist was like, who are you here for? What event are you here for? And really, if no one had said anything and she was able to get that USB stick into a random computer or maybe a router that no one saw, I mean, hey, that would have been just one person walking in with a stick and then compromising hundreds or thousands of devices in critical infrastructure. Like, there's a lot of vectors that, it doesn't cost anything, but man, the damage can it do?
Absolutely. The key here is you're spot on, Ben. We see lots of different iterations of what malware looks like, and it's constantly evolving. And the interesting part here is that these attacks don't have to be well designed or executed. For example, I recently got a phone call informed me, and I paraphrase, some legal enforcement action filed on my social security number, and it has now been suspended because of malicious activity. Right? The statement itself makes no sense.
Yeah.
Because obviously it's never going to be suspended. It doesn't make sense to anyone willing to spend 10 seconds thinking about it, but that's really the point and really the goal. These attackers are targets really those unable or unwilling to spot the obvious, like the elderly, the non-native speakers, the small businesses, the disenfranchised. Right? It would be really too expensive to target the high-tech, savvy, and informed. And so the approach here is really intentionally just volume over quality to intentionally weed out the ones that know better. And in the case in point you brought up earlier with the Mar-a-Lago attempt, it seems really low tech, but the onus on doing this kind of stuff is always on the attacker. They can send multiple people with these sticks on their hands by just paying somebody $20. And it's really cheap. However, protecting against them, it really takes an awake person at their desk, at the front desk, to spot somebody and have enough of just momentum to stop them. We all want to help people at our core as people. We want to be helpful to those around us, and so it really plays against us to reach out and say, wait a minute, stop! You don't look like you should be here. You don't look like the person that's. Let me question you while you're here. Let me spend a little more time interrogating you, and that's really, really hard to do. So
right, yeah,
at its core, why it's so hard to protect against these things.
Yeah, for a little while there, the co-host for the show, here was a white hat hacker himself, and he mentioned that when he did penetration testing, his favorite way to do it was to put on a nice suit, a nice tie, and walk in and say, "Hey, I'm from corporate. Can you show me to a computer? I need to test something." And without showing any valid ID, without showing any kind of credentials, the receptionist would go take him to a computer, sit him down, and he was in. Like it really wasn't more complicated than, like you said, people want to help people, and if you ask for help, even for someone who's like doing it, with a good nature, can cause a lot of problems. So definitely have seen that before. Yeah,
absolutely, and that's really at its core why it's so hard to protect against it. It's just that vectors of attack and constantly evolving, and the methods the attackers are using and the technology, the actual malware kits that they're bringing are constantly evolving as well, because it's ultimately it's profitable at some level. So, and it's also fairly achievable. These attack kits can be bought on the dark web and for a couple of $100s and deployed en masse fairly quickly. I of course don't recommend it. You'll get in lots of trouble.
Right.
But they're not incredibly hard to get a hold of and to deploy, which drives, of course, the opportunity here for attackers is the more the better.
Right. And so let me ask you this, and then we're going to wrap up the interview here really shortly, but let me ask you this. So obviously we can go all the way back as far as, 2014 with Target, or 2016, 17, whatever Equifax was. Seems like forever ago, but I'm sure it was probably 2018 or something. But, so like there are all these high profile things, National Health Services, and then you have stories like I mentioned way at the beginning of the show, where the app developers for Facebook had left the records of like 540 million different, or 540 or 450, whatever it is, million Facebook users out there in the open. Would you hear about these kinds of stories in cybersecurity and, let's say the ransomware? Do you sit back, being in this industry, being associated with the NCC group, and just say, we could have stopped that? How often are you kind of caught by surprise and said, wow, that's really innovative and that's never happened before? And how many times do you say, we could have stopped that? If they had just given us a call, we could have stopped that.
Well, we're in the business of helping companies, small and large, navigate the complex landscape of security. We do our best to invest in research with our consultants and really staying at the top, the leading edge of where the security is going, where the tooling is going, and how to not just execute these attacks so that we can test our clients and help them navigate their response, but also help them prevent these things from happening. So we work really hard to continuously shore up our skills and give back to the community with the tooling that we write. We'd be more than glad to, of course, talk to anyone who's kind of facing an incident or is thinking about doing some more work and reviewing their security posture and ultimately putting security posture. That's something that this company is really giving back to, which is really proud to be part of it.
Great answer. And let me just ask you one more question, and then I think we'll wrap it up. But I just saw that, the Internet of Things, and, let's face it, people have smart watches, smartphones, laptops, tablets, and so on and so forth, devices that they bring from home into the workplace. You mentioned small, medium, large businesses. They are kind of advocating for it because, hey, they don't have to pay for everyone's smartwatch. They don't have to, issue people phones. As far as bring your own device, is that something that you recommend, or is that something that you maybe shy away from, or is it just kind of a natural fact? It's something your employees are going to expect, so here's how to protect against bring your own device.
Yeah, great question. I think this is where the industry generally is going, where protecting everyone's devices, whether they're smartwatch or their phone or their laptop, it becomes really, really hard. So some of the approaches you may have heard, for example, Google has been spearheading this model of basically getting rid of firewalls, right? It's the concept of making sure that your data is first and foremost secure. It doesn't really matter what systems or devices the users are using, and really pushing out the perimeter out to the users, assuming that you don't have a firewall, assuming you don't have a kind of a core thing to protect. So, and really focusing on the endpoint of protecting users' smart devices, users' laptops. So we see it more and more with companies trying to go that route. It makes a lot of sense, but it really places the onus on spending the time on securing the endpoint, securing your smart mobile device, securing your laptop. And we're doing quite a bit of work here in helping clients navigate this landscape because it really is incredibly hard. The software that gets deployed on, people want to, check corporate email and do work, but also they want to play Candy Crush and other things and combine their, take pictures. And when you combine those two things with people wanting to use their devices outside of the context of typical corporate use, it gets pretty tricky because ultimately software is complex. and software is built with other software like libraries, for example, that could carry vulnerabilities. When you put all these things together, it gets fairly complex fairly quick. So to be able to secure these things well is really, really challenging, but ultimately extremely rewarding, because ultimately if we can get out of the way with security and help company focus more on business by giving them the opportunity to be flexible and giving them ability to execute without putting lots of guardrails in place, ultimately business wins.
I got you good, and thank you for answering that. That's it just kind of sprung in my head, and you answered that very, very well. So I'm going to let you go ahead, Gene, and have the last word on this. If people want to find out more about the NCC group, what you do, how they do it, where's the best place to go?
Sure, reach out to us on our website. We are constantly reach out to our consultants. We're constantly publishing tools. We're constantly publishing white papers and research. Interact consultants. They love learning what tools are being used and how they're being used, and love suggestions on how to improve tools. But ultimately, reach out to us via our website. Our North American team is fantastic here. I'm in New York, but we've got offices in Seattle, in Austin, Chicago, and Sunnyvale, and San Francisco. Lots of opportunity to interact. So reach out to us and see how we can help.
Perfect. And everyone, we'll have a link to the NCC group, nccgroup.trust. We'll have a link to that at Computer America. And Gene, I want to thank you so much for your time. I know that you're a busy guy, but very informative, and hey, great information. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Ben. I appreciate it.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. So we're gonna say goodbye. Have a great day, and we'll be sure to catch you later. But have a good one. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
All right, bye bye. All right, and there you go. So everyone, that's the end of our interview with the NCC group. Very interesting. Hope that we definitely hear more from them in the future. But yeah, that definitely went well, and we hope that you enjoyed that. So everyone, why don't we go ahead and switch on over to here now? Because we only have about 20 minutes or so left, we're going to go ahead and do computer and technology news. So why don't we go ahead and get started with that? Let's play the sound effect, and then here we go. Computer and technology news brought to you by Computer America. Now, for our first story today, we have a lot of great ones, and why don't we talk about Yahoo? Yeah, it's been that long. It's Yahoo, the one with the exclamation point. Well, Yahoo could pay $117 million to settle a data breach. I know, you thought that the company wasn't even a thing anymore, but it turns out that it's being kept in some kind of, hellish legal business purgatory, until everyone who is owed money can suck it out of its dried corpse. So that's where Yahoo is. And now it needs, of course, a judge's approval, but let's go ahead and get into the story, saying that, Yahoo is back in the courtroom with a revised settlement proposal meant to make amends for its massive data breaches. If you don't remember them, really they are the sum total of every account that was ever made with Yahoo. And before Gmail, Yahoo was between like Yahoo and Hotmail and at AOL.com. I mean, those were the big ones. And I think in total Yahoo lost something like 3.4 billion credentials. Really the largest data breach that's really ever happened. And now it turns out, because it's pretty much a defunct company, they're going to pay something that is not really commiserate with the damage that they did. But here we go, saying that if this is approved, of course, as we said, they will pay $117 million. Between 2013 and 2016, Yahoo had 3 separate breaches. The first leaked information from an estimate 3 billion accounts and is now the largest data breach in history, as we just mentioned. Yahoo's 2014 breach, which exposed 500 million users, followed close behind. In January, Judge Lucy Koh rejected Yahoo's first settlement proposal. It called for a $50 million payout and 2 years of free credit monitoring for about 200 million people in the US and Israel. But Koh rejected the initial proposal because it didn't say how much the settlement was worth or how much victims might expect to recover. Now it's up to Koh to decide if the proposal gets it right. As I said, this is one thing where you could liquidate everything in the company and you could spread it out to the 3 billion people, and you would probably get, less than $1 for every account that was compromised. There's not much left to Yahoo except for its horrible legacy. And yeah, now it's up for the courts and their lawyers to decide how best to divvy up even that. Just not a good look, and really kind of a sad state of affairs. Pretty sure Yahoo was taken over by, who was Yahoo purchased by? Yahoo was purchased, or was looking to be purchased by, I want to say Verizon. Yahoo sells to Verizon for $5 billion. And of course, back when Yahoo was at its largest, I mean, it was bigger than Google. It was definitely worth, tens of billions of dollars, and finally to be sold off and now even ripped apart even further. Hey, just not often we get to see Yahoo back in the headlines. So very interesting headline there. Now, why don't we go ahead and just continue on? So let's see. Let's go ahead and set this up real quick. So everyone, our next story that we're going to do is, how about this one? So tax time, April 15th. I'm sure a lot of you know that, it's time to start freaking out. It's get it in, file an extension, be late, pay fees, penalties, all that good stuff. Well, it used to be pretty easy. There was a system where you could file a simple tax return. It was very, very easy. There were lots of places that you could file it. And I believe the IRS was even let you file with them directly. Well, this headline from ProPublica, not exactly a good thing. And this is bordering on politics, but it's technology because, hey, filing your taxes online, everyone does it. But check this out. A bill supported by both Democrats and Republicans would make permanent a program that bars the IRS from ever developing its own online tax filing service. You heard that right. Instead of, passing legislation to make it easier for Americans to pay the obligations that they have to the government, no. Now we have legislation that, well, all of you should know, was lobbied by TurboTax and H&R Block. Both lobbied so that this would happen, saying that in one of its provisions, the bill makes it illegal for the IRS to create its own online tax system of filing. And companies like Intuit, the maker of TurboTax, and H&R Block have lobbied for years to block the IRS from creating such a system. If the tax agency created its own program, which would be similar to programs that other developed countries have, it would threaten the industry's profits. Because think about it, a lot of people, they really don't need to go to TurboTax or H&R Block. They just need to file a very simple form and pay their dues or get money back. It's really not that complicated. But because you have to go through TurboTax or H&R Block, they get their cut. They get some kind of consulting fee. They get money off the top. And if they were able to outlaw it completely, which this is looking like it's about to go through, then hey, the IRS would never be able to put a system like this in, and you're adding another layer, and that layer in between you and paying your taxes makes these companies a lot of money. So they have a quote here. This is from Mandy Matlock, a tax attorney who does work for the National Consumer Law Center, saying, quote, "This could be a disaster. It could be the final nail in the coffin of the idea of the IRS ever being able to create its own program." Which honestly, like they said, other developed countries shouldn't be that hard. And in fact, it should already be there. Now, experts have long argued that the IRS has failed to make filing taxes as easy and cheap as it could be. In addition to a free system of online tax preparation and filing, the agency could provide people with pre-filed tax forms containing the salary data the agency already has. And of course, this was reported back in 2013. They have something here called the FFA, which is not the Future Farmers of America, but rather the Free File Alliance. A private industry group says about 70% of American taxpayers are eligible to file for free. And those taxpayers who make less than $66,000 a year have access to free tax software provided by the companies. but just 3% of eligible U.S. taxpayers actually use the free program each year. So 70% are eligible, but only 3% actually use it. Well, actually 3% of the eligible, so that's even less. That's like 1% of, everyone who could be doing it actually uses it. Now, critics of the program say that the companies use it as a cross-marketing tool to upsell paid products, that they have deliberately underpromoted the free option, and that it leaves consumers' data open to privacy breaches. Because, of course, you think about all the credit reporting agencies and all of the tax, just really you're adding, again, that layer between you and your taxes. And we've seen so many companies mess this up. Either, people following false tax returns, or, losing the data outright, sending the money to the wrong place, or just being conned. If you dealt directly with the IRS over your taxes, you wouldn't have to worry about people calling you, or, people saying that they are who they aren't. But now, again, a system like this will never be implemented. Now, the congressional move would codify the status quo under an existing memorandum of understanding with the industry. The IRS pledges not to create its own filing system, and in exchange, the companies offer their free filing services to those below the income threshold. But again, as we just read, they underreport it, and they don't really advertise the fact that, that you're eligible for a free tax return, or at least a free tax filing. Now, we're going to go ahead and skip ahead, but this is obviously a pretty blatant move by lobbying, because, as I said, this writes into law the ability for Intuit, H&R Block to receive their profits off of you. So just wanted to report that one. It was a bit different, and there you go. Now, let's go ahead. Story number 3. Lots of different stories. Let's talk about
for comfort food at a comfortable price. Try my sour
autoplay videos. They are wonderful. Okay, now, everyone, let's go ahead and move on to this one. This is from ABC, ABC7 News, and this is pretty cool. So you may know Tesla. They have a new monitor feature. There's, you can monitor things inside the car. If your car's ever broken into, you can turn the camera on. And now we have one of the first times that it's actually come in handy. Saying that a suspected burglar caught after California man's Tesla records its own break-in with Sentry Mode in San Francisco. Because Teslas, hey, they're pretty good-looking cars and they're expensive. If you can steal one, you're good to go. Turns out stealing them is a little bit different than your average car. Saying a car thief was caught on camera and then caught thanks to one of the Tesla's latest software updates. Saying that the car's owners were able to capture stunningly clear video of his vehicle being broken into in San Francisco. And they said that Jed Franklin is a model who super commutes more than 100 miles from Folsom to San Francisco for fittings and photo shoots. And while parked along the just parked there for a fitting, Jed got an alert on his Tesla app that Sentry Mode had been triggered. Very disconcerting. So there you go. That's now the question, of course, remains. Sentry Mode was offered to Tesla customers as a software upgrade in February. It's available on Model 3 cars and on Model S and X Teslas built after August of 2017. You have to have that built-in dashboard, front-facing camera. He was able to capture a full view of a suspect pulling up in a white sedan in front of his Model 3, get out of the vehicle, sneak around to the passenger side, and use a small tool to break into the backseat window. Saying, quote, "It's unusual. So for one, I was upset to see the car getting broken into, but on the other side, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is actually getting recorded." And if you're watching the video portion, we're going to go ahead and, kind of play the video of the person, that they were able to, kind of catch. But yeah, saying, Jed is getting his window fixed next week, and in the meantime considers the arrest a small victory, only for himself, but for the city as a whole. So there you go. Don't steal cars. It's really not that hard, and I think that with the amount of publicity that this is going to get, if you are hoping to get into the booming industry of stealing cars, I feel like there are enough cameras in not just Teslas. Teslas are, of course, one of the more popular technology-focused cars, but cameras are going to be embedded in more and more cars, and this is going to be an everyday thing. Every car is going to be its own security system on top of that. So, man, very, very different. And there you have it. So with that being said, there's article number 3. Article number 4. There is no segment of the population less, speaking of criminals in our last story, but there is no segment of the population that is less sympathetic than those in prison. Those for violent crimes, those for non-violent crimes, whatever have you, just those people who are in prison, they get taken advantage of in this world of technology that we take for granted. They are just, treated so poorly. And this is yet another story about that. If you haven't heard about this, you definitely want to pay attention. And it's really, when it goes back to politics, it's just no one wants to run on a platform saying, hey, we need to ease up on criminals. It's everyone wants to be tough on crime, but at the same time, this is almost inhumane with what we're doing to them. Now, Ars Technica, this was published today. Actually, yesterday, I'm sorry. But yeah, more jails replace in-person visits with awful video chat products. So think like, for those of you who are simply listening on the radio, can't see the picture, think of kind of like a small square touchscreen, which would have your video, and you pick up a phone that would, you'd be able to listen to. But otherwise, that's all you get. You only get to see someone through a small, I'm sure not even HD webcam instead of face-to-face. One of those things that if you're looking to actually rehabilitate people, actually having human connections helps with that. Not just through a webcam, but actually seeing someone. Now, after April 15th, inmates at the Adult Detention Center in Lowndes County, Mississippi, will no longer be allowed to visit family members face-to-face. They said that Newton County, Missouri, implemented an in-person visit ban last month, and the Allen County Jail in Indiana phased out in-person visits earlier this year. It's just crazy. All 3 changes are part of a nationwide trend towards video visitation services, saying that instead of seeing their loved ones face-to-face, inmates are increasingly limited to talking to them through video terminals. Most jails give family members a choice between using video terminals at the jail, which are free, or paying fees to make calls from home using a PC or mobile device. So, the capabilities there to just pick up Skype, schedule something and call someone, which if anyone has access to any kind of piece of technology in the past 10 years, that Skype calls are free. And a system like this would be very, very similar. But here we go. They're saying, again, unless you drive all the way down to the jail, all the way down to the prison, you have to pay 50 cents a minute. 50 cents. Even collect calls back in the day didn't cost this much. These things are criminal, just how expensive they can be. Saying that video calls can cost 40 cents per minute in Newton County, 50 cents per minute in Lowndes County, and $10 per call in Allen County. Yeah, $10 per call. If you have a 5-minute phone call, 5-minute phone call costs you $10. That's crazy. Outside of prison, of course, video calls on Skype or FaceTime are free. You should know that. It's, video calling is not a complicated issue. They said that these visitation services are also noticeably inferior to mainstream video calling services. The author of the story was working on another story about the video visitation trend last year, and he wanted to try the technology out for himself, so he called inmate Justin Harker at the Knox County Jail in Tennessee. And of course, as he wrote at the time, the video was grainy and jerky, periodically freezing up altogether, saying that the call cost him 19 cents a minute. The point is, the technology, as far as video visitation, which if you want to, again, rehabilitate people, like I'm okay with monitoring the conversation, make sure that they're not doing anything illicit or that they are not, conducting any further crimes through, this kind of thing. Like I get that kind of monitoring of the service, but at least make it free or at least make it super, super cheap, because right now it's bad, it's low quality, and it's stupid expensive. And again, it comes back around to the to the point of it's a lot of these prisons are for profit. They make money off of prisoners, and this is another way to turn a basic service into another revenue stream. And there's not a lot of sympathy to be had for people who have been convicted of crimes. Now, the article finishes up, a big motivator is money. In-person visits are labor intensive. Prison guards need to escort inmates to and from visitation rooms, supervise the visits, and in some cases, pat down visitors for contraband. In contrast, video terminals could be installed inside each cell block, minimizing the need to move inmates around the jail. But let's face it, the amount of money that we spend on prisons and the amount of money that goes into housing inmates, how hard would it be to either install something, right there in their own jail cell or to offer this service for free? It just seems like the purpose of prison is no longer to rehabilitate, but rather to make money from. It's a sad thing to see, and I don't know, just as someone who knows what goes into the technology and the fact that they're being charged $10 per video call, it's just crazy. Crazy. So there you go. There's that story. And we have time for just about, not even one. Well, okay. We have time for one more. We'll go ahead and try our best. Let's talk. Okay. So I want to say about Friday, we mentioned the GPS was going to roll over. Because a lot of them, if they weren't patched, they were developed back in the 90s. And according to the article that we did, a lot of the global positioning systems that were not updated in like the past 15 years, so this is not going to be the majority of them. This is going to be those who have been, long standing. Those that weren't updated, well, the clock was going to reset back to 00000, and all of the dates and everything would be kind of reset, which leads you to having situations where even though we reported on it, and it turns out that a couple airlines were not listening, saying that, flights have been canceled and delayed thanks to the GPS rollover. Shame on them. This is again all for using the 10-bit calendar as opposed to the new, freshly minted 12-bit calendar. But according to reports on social media, at least one KLM flight, a Boeing 777 bound from Amsterdam to Bogota. Okay. And flights involving as many as 15 Boeing 777s and 787s in China were delayed or canceled over the weekend because of the calendar rollover errors in navigation system aboard those aircraft. So, hey, at least nothing in the US. So, something to be said for that. Now, a user reported that his girlfriend's KLM flight, a KL741 from Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, was grounded because something to do with the date being wrong, and Honeywell can't guarantee the plane's safety. And Honeywell has the systems that utilize the GPS, and turns out they weren't updated. And if you're watching the video portion, you can see a picture here where the date on the instruments that the pilots would be using says that it's currently 3 o'clock. Well, 3 whatever. It's August 22nd, 1999. which is clearly not the case. They said that the same issue appeared to hit a Shanghai Airport 787, as well as over a dozen other aircrafts based on a photo posted to Twitter by China Aviation Review. There you go. Just, kind of silly. Obviously, I'm sure that these people, it's only a handful of planes across the entire planet, which is not bad. Of the thousands upon thousands of airplanes that we know of, and the fact that, hey, only this many were actually affected, that's pretty good. So there you have it. Everyone, we're just about flat out of time. And I want to say thank you so much for tuning into Computer America. Hey, there's the music. We're about out of time. Thank you so much. And if you missed any part of our show today, please check out computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything, including links to our guest website, the NCC group, as well as all the articles that we did and more. So ladies and gentlemen, until next time, thank you so much for tuning in. And hey, we'll catch you here, same time, same place, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. And we'll be here. We'll hope you'll be here too. Oh, by the way, tomorrow on the program, we should have none other, I believe, than Sandy Berger, consumer electronics expert. Whole bunch of topics, everyone. It'll be a fun time. Catch you next time. Bye-bye.